Welcome to part 2 of interpersonal relationship theories. So we just ended the first video talking about social exchange theory and the different cost versus reward decisions that we make when comparing the immediate and long-term costs of a relationship to the immediate and long-term rewards in a relationship. So let's talk about another theory which is very important in interpersonal relationships, and that is the idea that we have tensions in relationships, and the best way to deal with tension is to manage them. And the idea that we manage tension being pulled in two different directions at the same time is called relational dialectics theory. And there's 4 different parts to this. The first part is kind of this overall connection of understanding that there is going to be tension in a relationship, and how we deal with the relationship and its tensions, how we manage those tensions between the two people, are what ultimately get us through the different struggles and tensions that we have in a relationship. The remaining 3 parts actually go over what types of tensions we have. The first one is this pull between a relationship of being connected and wanting to be ourselves. Feeling this idea that ultimately we are tied to somebody in a relationship definition, and we are our own people. We are our own selves. We decide our own things. We make our own decisions, for good or bad, and we are not connected to one person. Kind of your love to be loved and your love of your own independence. So you can see in a relationship, if one person loves this connection of being connected to somebody and the other person likes this independence and not being connected to somebody, you can easily see where these tensions will have people pulled in 2 different directions. The second one is this idea of predictability versus novelty. The idea of, think of it as like the things that we can count on in life, versus the uncertainty, the things that surprise us, things that we're not expecting. Another way to define predictability versus novelty is the idea of how much we love the routine of life and relationships, thus the predictability, and how much we want and need and love the need for freshness, the things for new, exciting, challenging things, thus the novelty. So predictability versus novelty. The last one is openness versus closedness. And that is the idea of being completely open with somebody versus being completely private with somebody, or however you fall on that scale. Your ability to be open with somebody versus your ability to be closed with somebody. So as you can see in these 3 further definitions of relational dialectics theory, this idea that we manage these pools, sometimes natural pools we have within ourselves, and how we manage them in a relationship. So I'll give you an example of connection versus autonomy. And then there's also an example video that I have from the show Friends, which is not new to you guys. You know that I love that show, so I love to show you as many clips as I can. That actually is a good example of predictability versus novelty. So in connection versus autonomy, I will tell you that this is probably one of the biggest areas that I see in a close relationship that my husband and I have with good friends of ours, who one person often feels very connected to somebody, and the other person often feels like they want to be their own person, they want to make their own decisions, understanding that they're part of a relationship where sometimes decisions impact both people. We see this struggle happen pretty often, where there's this idea that people love to do their own thing and have their own independence and really not consider other people when they make their decisions. And this idea that when you join together in a marriage, that you sometimes have decisions that you have to make that are for the collective good of the entire unit. So we are talking to them, sometimes joking, sometimes serious, right? Sometimes you don't always have to have the deepest, most serious conversations about this, but we've shared with them a couple times that we as outsiders have noticed the fact that there is this little bit of a relationship pool when we see people going in 2 different directions that way. So that's my personal example of close friends of ours that we see, but check out the video for the example of predictability versus novelty. I think you'll find it funny, kind of lighthearted. So moving right along to the next theory, this is the idea, social penetration theory, is the idea that our relationship development depends on the level of intimacy, thus the level of self-disclosure that we have with people. It's basically saying that the more self-disclosure you give, the deeper your intimacy level will be, and you decide this based on how you want people to get to know you better. There's a great example on page 259. So if you wanted to utilize your book while I'm talking, feel free to flip to page 259. But let's show you a quick kind of diagram that shows you what we're talking about. In social penetration theory, it says that there are two parts to your level of intimacy and self-disclosure. There is the breadth of information somebody knows about you and the depth of information somebody knows about you. The breadth of information is how much they collectively know about you. Your fears, your beliefs, your hobbies, things you like to do, things that you think are funny, things that you don't like to do, and things that you don't think are funny. Your favorite TV shows, the places you like to go on vacation, where you've been on vacation in your life, just all these collective things that somebody could kind of say about you. That's the breadth of it. And somebody can know a lot of things about you, a lot of individual things about you. The depth of information is how much they know that's personally disclosed by you. Deep things, things like your greatest fears in life and what they actually are, naming them with words. Things that keep you up at night, things that anger you, things that make you feel disrespected, things that make you feel like your trust is being broken, things that you love, but why you actually love them. So a good example I think the book actually gives is saying that the way you can differentiate these two, your breadth versus your depth, is if somebody knows your favorite ice cream flavor versus your deepest fear of dying alone. So if somebody knows your favorite ice cream flavor, they know something about you that is considered surface level. And surface level is this idea of breadth, this idea of this circle that goes around and around that is superficial level. And as somebody knows a little bit deeper about you, kind of peels the onion away. And I love that this diagram has that up in the upper right-hand corner because it really is like the layers of an onion. The more they get to know you, the more intimate they feel. Intimate level is just a deeper level. So your favorite ice cream flavor is what? Because of why, right? And you can go a little bit deeper. Then it gets really personal when you decide to self-disclose even more. And then the goal of self-penetration theory and that knowing somebody the deepest level is to get to this core. And that is the deepest level of intimacy, the most self-disclosure you have with people. So think about the people that live in each of these areas. Think about the people that live in the green area, people that know a lot about you, a lot of things about you, but really don't know you on a deep level. Think about people that know you really well. They know a lot about you, but they know some deeper things about you as well. Then there's people that know you a little bit more. And then there are people that know you to your core. And those, as you can imagine, as you start to get into the different colors, as you move from green to blue to the orange to the bright yellow, as you can imagine, those things get even smaller. Those groups of people that you have those numbers get smaller and smaller. The number of people that live in green are going to be not the number of people that live in the yellow. There's going to be a small core group of people that you think live in your core that know the most about you. So that's social penetration theory. So you saw this at the beginning of the semester. It was the window idea that you have 4 parts to your window. There's the known, the hidden, the blind, and the unknown. And remember, you have like the blinds that go down. There's the ones that are completely boarded up. There's ones where the shades are kind of drawn a little bit. And then there's one that there's no shades at all, right? So this is actually tied into intimacy and self-disclosure because there are parts of ourselves that we want to self-disclose, and there are parts of ourselves that we don't feel comfortable self-disclosing. There are parts of ourselves that we know we do not want to self-disclose, and then there's parts of ourselves that we haven't even discovered that are parts of ourselves. So it's kind of unknown to ourselves. So how do we share with somebody else if we don't actually know that about ourselves yet? So you can see this in front of you as the same idea of the window, of that there are things that we know about ourselves and other people know about us, so we tell them. There are things that we know about ourselves that we don't tell other people, or we only tell a few people. There are things that we know about ourselves that there's things that other people know about ourselves that we don't know. Actions people have observed, things that they've heard, other things that they've come to conclusions about, things that have been told to them that have not been told to yourself yet. That is a blind self. Other people know things about us that we haven't discovered yet. And then number 4 is obviously the last piece, which is there are things that we don't know about ourselves and other people certainly don't know, because if we don't know and we have not disclosed to those people, how are they going to know it as well, right? So there's things that go all different ways when it comes to self-disclosure. When we look at self-disclosure and we talk about relationships, we actually break it out in a couple different ways. We talk about low-risk self-disclosure and high-risk self-disclosure. Low-risk self-disclosures are typically happening in the beginning of relationships, and these are things that we don't necessarily feel like are going to hurt us in any way. If you share your favorite ice cream flavor with somebody, if you tell them it's mint chocolate chip, that's pretty low risk self-disclosure thing that you can tell somebody. It's really hard for you to feel like somebody could take that information and use it against you or betray your trust with your favorite ice cream flavor. High risk self-disclosure is the things that you tell people that you will ask yourself, how will this affect my long-term relationship? How will me investing in telling them something that I think is very sacred to myself, how will that help in a long-term relationship? If you don't feel that you are in a long-term relationship with somebody, typically you do not give high-risk information. You don't tell people the deepest parts of you because you don't feel like that is going to help in a long-term relationship situation. So low risk are the things that you feel you can easily share in the early stages, and high risk are usually those deeper level things that become on the intimate, personal, and core level of self-disclosure that you feel like you feel comfortable sharing because that person is going to be in it for the long haul. If somebody takes high risk self-disclosure items and betrays your trust with them, that's actually one of the biggest igniters of the de-escalation of relationships. And we'll talk about de-escalation next week. That's actually the next part of relationships. But that is often, if you think about relationships that ended for a specific reason, it's usually somebody taking a high-risk self-disclosure item and using it against you. That's typically where that breakdown happens. And it happens on multiple levels and with multiple things. So it's not necessarily maybe something somebody says with information, but maybe something somebody does with information. Then the last level is intimacy. And we talk about self-disclosure and intimacy as one-on-one or parts of each other, but they can obviously change over time. But the important part about intimacy is that you can't get to intimacy without self-disclosure. You cannot say that you are intimate with somebody or know somebody intimately unless you have gone to the deepest level of self-disclosure. So as you can imagine, as self-disclosure increases, so does the depth of your intimacy. This is a graph from the book just to show you, but if you have the book open to that page that I recommended earlier, you'll probably have seen this already, but it actually just shows you about how self-disclosure changes over time. The last part is communication privacy management theory. CPMT is an idea that we manage our own degree of privacy based on personal boundaries and rules that we set on the information that we are going to share with other people. And that's set a couple different ways. That is set through rules and boundaries that we set for ourselves. They can be set by witnessing other relationships. They can be set by other experiences that we've had, lessons that we've learned from. We know that we usually move in small increments when it comes to sharing information. If you self-disclose items, they usually come in small increments and small chunks. So we know that we manage our personal boundaries that way. We know that we manage our privacy that way for the most part. It moves from less personal items to more personal items. We probably set less boundaries for these less personal things like our favorite ice cream flavor and our favorite movie versus more personal items. We have more boundaries around that to protect us. Our self-disclosure has to be reciprocal if we feel like we are managing a relationship well. We also know that managing a relationship takes a few things: risk, trust, and a perception that it is taking you somewhere.